Welcome back. The panel is with us from their remote locations. MSNBC anchor Joshua Johnson, NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Casey Hunt, and Rich Lowry, editor of National Review. And to sort of set the table here, I want to showcase our NBC News political unit's first battleground map of 2020. Full disclosure, I am a member of said political unit, so I've contributed this myself. We're going to start with the 20 states Hillary Clinton won in 2016, all of which remain in Biden's column right now. Maine's 2nd congressional district, which Trump carried in 2016, we are currently classifying as a toss-up. That's why you see some stripes there. Also trending Biden's way right now are 6 Trump 2016 states that we've been considering the key 6 battlegrounds for 2020. Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania in the north, Arizona, North Carolina, and Florida in the south. Right now, none are toss-ups. All have Biden with a consistent lead. And right now, before we get to our toss-up states, Biden would already have 334 electoral votes if just the states that he's leading in win his way. Far more than the 270 he needs, on par with the Barack Obama electoral numbers of 2008 and 2012. President Trump leads in 20 states, good for 125 electoral votes. Nebraska's 2nd congressional district, we have as lean Biden right now. So at least 4 states, Georgia, Ohio, Iowa, and Texas, plus that Maine district, all of which President Trump won last time, as the remaining toss-ups worth 79 electoral votes. But if those are the toss-up states, you know where the map is. So Rich Lowry, I start with this a backdrop because I asked this simple question. Why is the president not taking the Democrats' deal at this point? Because it seems it probably would help his reelection prospects.
Yeah, well, Chuck, there's some dispute about how real the reduced spending is in the latest Democratic offer, but the White House definitely has been reluctant to get much above $1 trillion. And I think it's with an eye to renewed Republican concern about the deficit. And I very much get concern about the deficit. But the real sin here isn't deficit spending in the midst of major economic dislocation. It was all the deficit spending that took place when the economy was good.
Mm-hmm. Joshua Johnson, I had a one Democratic aide. That's been what's made these negotiations so odd, is that the normal rules of politics they thought would apply to the other side, which is the political pressure of the moment, has not impacted them yet.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, the way that the political pressure has shifted over the course of this pandemic. I mean, Mitch McConnell was interviewed by Politico this week and said it's a lot harder now than it was 4 months ago. We're that much closer to the election. I do think Dr. Navarro made an interesting point in saying that you don't negotiate in public. That may be part of why this is so hard. I think it's also telling that both sides can't seem to come to an agreement, perhaps because of the publicity around these negotiations. It might be better on both sides if they just sent delegates and if all the major players stayed home and just stayed away from cameras for a while. But yeah, I mean, as we get closer to the election, unfortunately, it seems like less and less is getting agreed to, because every soundbite after every negotiation becomes something that could end up in an opponent's campaign ad.
You know, Casey, I look at this situation, I think, well, they have to come to an agreement. There's just no choice. The economic fallout is too great not to. And yet, do you see them landing this plane this week?
I think the blame game has made that potentially very difficult at this point, Chuck. And Republicans are essentially making a bet that Democrats are not going to go out there and try to knock down the president's unemployment insurance executive order because they simply can't be seen doing that. And I think there are real questions about Mark Meadows, the White House chief of staff, and his role in these negotiations, because Steve Mnuchin seemed relatively willing to cut this deal with Democrats. And there does seem to be this overarching bet on the part of Democrats that the people that are going to pay the ultimate political price for not doing a deal are going to be Republicans in the Senate and the White House. Now, whether that's the best course of action for the country, I think is up to our viewers to decide.
Hey, Rich, is the real problem here for the White House the fact that any deal that Congress cuts is going to be majority Democrats having to vote for both in the House and the Senate?
Yep. Yeah, that's another constraint. But it's definitely his political interest to do this, to get a deal. These executive orders they're nebulous, they're confused, they're a poor substitute for lawmaking. And I should note, even if they're technically legal, this is not how our system is supposed to work, where Congress affirmatively declines to do something and the president rummages around for authorities to try to do it on his own. This is part of a long-running trend of an overweening executive trampling on a feckless Congress.
Are Are you in the Ben Sass camp, Rich? What did he call it? Constitutional slop?
Yeah, it's against the spirit of our system. It's what many of us invade against Obama's second term and pen and phone governance, and it's just an extension of that.
Yeah. I want to pivot to Veep Steak since we're going to stick with politics here. Joshua, the David Axelrod tweet that I asked Senator Durbin about. It is an insider conversation, but this idea that are some candidates running too aggressive of a campaign for this number 2 slot?
Well, that's the thing is I'm not sure how to read the campaign. Like, if you were asking me who was going to win, the NBA championship, I know the rules of the game and I know how the players have done. No one knows the rules of this game. None of us knows exactly what the campaign strategy is, who the players are, or what the leaderboard is. So there's kind of no way for us to know, which makes this whole political season even more opaque. Forgive me, Chuck, by the way, but I did want to mention, before we get too far out, Dr. Navarro did say something to you that was a bit deceptive in his assessment of the way that the payroll tax is being viewed, which also makes these negotiations harder. He said Nancy Pelosi supported it in 2011. That was a payroll tax cut of 2 percentage points, not a complete payroll tax cut. So that was deceptive in what he said.
Well, and not only that, there was also a plan to restore Social Security. You get to the challenge of trying to fit an hour's worth of television in.
Right.
There were a lot of things that I had to unpack on that one. Casey Hunt, we're going to hear from the vice president at some point about his running mate, maybe tomorrow. It does feel as if we're still sitting in, it's Kamala Harris versus the field. And it is this Kamala, there's sort of, Biden world seems divided. Some think it's the perfect pick, and some think, can you trust her to be your loyal number 2?
Well, and David Axelrod didn't name names, but the underlying suggestion has been that it's Kamala Harris's camp that is playing political hardball behind the scenes here and trying to make sure that her way to this pick is relatively clear. I'm not saying that we have reporting on that, but the suggestion from people in public is very strong. And I think, that's rubbed a lot of women the wrong way. Women operatives I talked to have looked at this process and feel that, we're experiencing a little bit more of what Hillary Clinton went through, that this process is this way partly because it's women fighting it out and people are less comfortable with women in that role. But I think at the end of the day, this is going to come down to the relationship between the vice president and the person that he ultimately picks. So only he knows the answer to that question.
And the fact of the matter is, we know he's probably met with more of these folks face to face than we've been able to track during this pandemic. All right, guys, well done. Thank you very much. Hello from Washington. I'm Chuck Todd, and thanks for checking out the Meet the Press channel on YouTube. Click on the button down here to subscribe and click over here to watch the latest interviews, highlights, and other digital exclusives.